Hey, welcome my B-Sider community to a brand new episode of my podcast where myself and guests share their experiences with music, their life through the lens of music, and the little bit of golden nuggets and wisdom we sort of take from that. And hopefully, you can take something similar out of it or get some ideas that you can implement in your life. And yes, another amazing guest is here with me today, and I can't wait to introduce you to her. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, I think. So, yeah, sit down, grab a nice drink if that's a cup of tea or something stronger, and just take out half an hour of your time and enjoy. And I'm so happy and excited to welcome Rebecca this time to my podcast. Hello, Rebecca. How's it going?
Hi, well, I was about to say good morning again. Good evening. It's it's going great. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. And yeah, this is going to be a juicy one, I think.
Let's see.
Before we dive into the juicy golden nuggets, a little bit about you, and I'm just going to throw out a few things that I read in your bio that I think could be very interesting for my audience. And then please feel free to add on anything that you feel, you would like them to know about yourself. Now, the things that stood out to me when reading your bio were that you're a somatic sex therapist and an expert in men's sexuality. Don't come across that one very often, so you're probably going to touch on that in a bit. And you've worked in that area or realm, as you said, for 25 years, but for the last 15, you were really digging into that specific area. And you're also an author. You have your own podcast, and you created some little bits of products that men can use to help with their sexuality. These are the things that stood out to me. Is there anything else that you want to add on to that and think it's important?
I mean, that's a pretty good summary of what I do and who I work with. What would I add to that? The only thing that comes to mind really is that I've started using that term somatic sex therapist because although a lot of people still don't know what that is, before that I was saying sexual alchemist because to me that feels much more like it says what I do, but people don't know what that is either. And somatic sex therapist is more, it gives people more of an idea, somatics with the body, sex therapist.
Yeah.
But apart from that, everything you've said is more or less a very good summary.
Excellent. And obviously your calling is a whole nother topic we could probably dive into, but I'm sure we'll probably touch on it a little bit during this episode, because obviously the person that you sort of helped you in this whole thing is an artist. But to start off with, just generally, give me an idea, my audience, an idea of music. How important is it for you in your life?
And there's so many ways I could begin there. It's enormously important for me, and from everything from and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but the things that it's woken up in me, the kind of groundwork that it's laid for me as a sexual woman and as a woman who works with sexuality. And also as an older woman. I mean, I'm 56 years old, and so I've seen how music has changed as well over the decades, and how, the stuff I notice is how music talks about sex a lot. That's kind of the area that I notice, not only, but that, how we talk about that has changed for better or worse. And also using music as part of the healing that I do, because music can elicit different feelings. It can help you get in touch with certain emotions and help you to bring them out so that instead of them being trapped in your body, you can release them. And so, I listen to music for fun, and I use music for healing and transforming as well for myself and others. So it's a massive part of my life. And my partner's a musician.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Well, you've got it covered on all angles then. Yes. and I love that you actually use it in both your private life as well as in your business. That I find that really, really cool.
Mm.
Now, as you said, we'll touch on a few other things shortly, but I think let's not beat around the bush. Let's go straight to who really had a massive impact in your life, and reveal to everybody who that is, and give us a bit of a backstory on why this artist is so close to your heart. So
I
I'll
may
open the
cry.
floor. That's fine. I can't hand you tissues, but
I've got some. For me, that is hands down Prince. Prince had a just enormous impact on my life. And in fact, just about 8 days ago was the 6th anniversary of his passing away. And, it's a funny one, isn't it? Like, I've never really, before Prince died, I never really understood how people got so impacted by the death of someone they didn't know. And then Prince died, and like the bottom of my world fell out. And even I was like, that's so weird. Like, I love him, but I feel more devastated than I would ever have expected to feel. And this just past anniversary, for a lot of the day, I just was like, I'll put on some Prince. No, can't. I'll put on some Prince. No, can't. Just like, I couldn't do it. And then I said to my partner, will you listen to some Prince with me later? Or can we sit down and watch some Prince videos? She agreed. And I just cried like a baby, and that's 6 years after his death. So you can imagine, how his life might have impacted me. And I was probably 14 or 15 when I first heard his music. And I think by then that would have been his second album, or maybe, I don't know. He put like his first 4 came out in like 2 or 3 years. And that was around the time that I was 14, 15. So it's all a bit of a blur. I couldn't tell you exact timings, but that was the time that my sexuality was developing. That was the time that I was figuring out who I was becoming, like, that's that weird time between childhood and young adulthood and that kind of thing. In fact, I would say I didn't even, because I was quite naive, and I didn't recognize, I recognized that the sound of his music was sexy. I didn't recognize at first that some of the words were. And I remember getting ready for school one day, and my sister was getting ready and my mother was getting ready, and we had some music on, and it would have been the radio, and Little Red Corvette came on, and my mom like freaked out about how filthy this song was. I mean, I still don't think it's that filthy, but she had her issues around sort of thing. And I was like, oh, is Prince filthy? Like, is he? Let me go back and listen. And then I was like, okay. Then I started listening to whole albums instead of just random songs. And it was like, this man's got some sexy going on, But for me, like, there's a lot of sexy music out, especially then. Like, that would have been late 70s, early 80s. There was some sexy stuff going on. But I don't know, something about the way that Prince brought himself fully into it. Or even talking about now, it just does something in my system. It's delicious. It feels like it wakes, like I felt like he channeled something very pure. And when I tap into his channeling of that, it helps me tap into that in myself.
Wow, that is pretty powerful stuff. If one artist could have an impact on one person like that, it makes you kind of wonder if you ever had a chance to tell him that. It would be interesting to see how he would digest and react to it.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is there's my fantasy of how he would react to that, and then there's the reality, right? Because he was a complex man, not always kind, and so my fantasy of how he would react is obviously in my favor.
Yeah, you don't kind of want to burst your own bubble on that one, do you?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose in a way he would be proud of him being that artist that people actually can connect to and get something out of it, because I suppose part of every artist is to do something along those lines, to impact people in some shape or form.
Yeah.
So I could imagine he will be happy about that, even though he might not be. Why wouldn't he though? Isn't that part of,
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I think it would depend on which decade and that that you know,
okay.
if I were to have that conversation with him, it would depend on who he was at that time,
Mm,
because there were times, like everyone, that I feel he was much more in tune with that which he channeled, which he brought, that pure essence of him, and there were times when, you know, he was very far away from it, like everyone, and so it may
mm-hmm.
have, I think it would depend on when in his life that conversation occurred. Now, like even from the other side, I feel like I could talk with him about it. And he, honestly, I feel like he would tell me, find that in myself.
Yes, that's actually a really good point. And I like that you know, the message is basically, like you said, go inwards and look at yourself, and if it fits, it fits, and then stick to that, and don't kind of give a damn what everyone else says. And for me personally, with Prince, I always loved that about him. He just did his thing. He didn't, externally it appeared, he didn't really care what was going on in the music scene much, or how other people perceived him, because he seemed to know who he was to a certain
Right.
degree, at least as a musician,
Yeah.
and really embodied that. And I mean, even just watching him on YouTube or somewhere else, I mean, if you cannot feel that,
Mm.
I feel there's something wrong with you.
No,
Sorry.
no, it's funny you say that. Have you seen the video while oh, you know, while my guitar gently weeps, went out my head. It's like an American Music Awards, where Prince was receiving an award, and Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne and Danny Harrison and a couple of other famous people who I can't remember who, they're up there playing this version of While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And Prince comes in, it's a 6-minute video. He comes in about 3 minutes in and plays solo guitar that will melt your face. And they never knew. He didn't turn up to any rehearsals. He just said, "Don't worry, I've got you." He went out. He shows up on stage while they're recording live and does the space melter. And what's amazing is, you know, usually in comments on YouTube, you get some rude stuff and people, oh, I don't like Prince or whatever stupid stuff they want to say. There's not a single bad comment under that video. And in fact, like there was one from a guy saying, "I think I'm pregnant now," from just watching him play. Because it is, for me, one of the most beautiful moments in human history I have ever seen, because it's so pure. And my partner plays guitar, and I said, you know, I watch that and think it's absolute pure magic. I can't play guitar, so for me, you know, what is that like for you as someone who could play that song, kind of thing? And he said, yeah, technically I could play those same notes in that same way. He said, but that's not what makes it magic. It's the energy that Prince is channeling in that moment that you can feel palpably in your body, even watching it years later on a video. That only Prince could do that in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would never have the same flavor. You know, like even if you could play it exactly precisely as he did, you couldn't channel him. And I think for me, that's the big lesson I try and carry with me, is that I'm not supposed to channel Prince. I'm supposed to channel my own pure essence.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
but he was definitely like still a huge motivator for me in that, or inspiration, maybe not motivator.
That's a long time if you think about it, from 14 to where you are now, to have this one artist being kind of by your side and yeah, giving you this, I don't know what the right word is, but it's inspiration, motivation, whatever it is, to do your thing. And you know, I find that so fantastic. I don't think you get that very often, that you just have this one particular artist that you're just like mind blown.
Yeah.
So were there any specific moments throughout maybe your business journey or genuine life where print was specifically important, apart from obviously when you were 14 and you just found him? Were there other moments?
Yeah, it's interesting, because obviously everything that we talk about exists within a context of something. And so I was, I think, about 16. Let me just think. 16, no, 17, when Purple Rain came out. And there was nothing like that before. Like nothing like that existed. The whole, I mean, great albums, great entire albums existed, but this was just like, it was a story, it had a film, it was sexy, like it was just very unique at the time. And I was like, I can't remember exactly, 16, 17 years old. I was dating someone who was like the first person the first man I'd felt love with. I'd had a couple of boyfriends when I was younger, but this was the first one we told each other we loved each other. This was the boyfriend that taught me how to orgasm. Like this was a very impactful relationship. And I can't remember exactly how long it went on, but it was kind of ending around the time that Purple Rain came out. We were on again, off again for a little bit. I was away at uni. So, we didn't know about open relationships. We didn't have mobile phones then or email, so it was difficult to stay in touch. I was 400 miles away. And I can remember listening to Purple Rain. And when The Beautiful Ones came on, I don't know if you know that track. It's this whole thing about the beautiful ones will hurt you and break your heart. And it's all very like, woe is me. And I would put that on and cry my heart out, like, and this boyfriend was very, very pretty, and cry my eyes out because he was the beautiful one that was breaking my heart. It was so,
oh no,
so dramatic. But beautiful as well. Like, I still vaguely know that boyfriend. We're kind of vaguely in each other's lives. And I still kind of chuckle lovingly when I think of that song and how dramatic I was at 16. And
aren't we all?
Well, indeed. Yeah. And I think after that, there were a couple of albums. There was, my brain's just asleep at the moment.
That's okay.
The one that Raspberry Beret was on. A couple of albums that I thought were awesome. And after that, I didn't listen to him for years. I listened to everything previous to that, that I'd grown up with up till about, I guess it was up till about 21, 22. A sign of the Times. That was the one I think that came after Purple Rain, and there was another one. And those two I loved. And everything previous to that, I loved. After that, I felt like he lost his way a bit. And I mean, that's not surprising. He put out like 6, 7, 8 albums. Like that was some good shit right there. And it was very impactful for me. And that's the stuff that really continued to impact me. The other stuff, in part, I didn't feel like he was still as in his essence as before. And also I had then moved from the USA to the UK, and we didn't have the internet yet. I didn't listen to a lot of radio. So I wasn't hearing much new stuff either, specific to him. And I was still listening to the old stuff. So there was a huge gap where I just didn't really know what was going on with him, or wasn't listening to his music. And then at some point, and I can't really even pinpoint when, it's like the modern version of him came back into my awareness. And I was like, what the hell's Prince up to these days, kind of thing. And turned out he'd been married, and I didn't even know anything about that, and like,
oh no.
I kind of missed the whole kind of second half of his stuff. And then at some point I got caught up on that, where he'd been and what he'd been doing and the music he'd been making and his 2 wives and, the whole palaver around his child dying and all kinds of stuff. And I felt like he got pointed in a direction that didn't allow him to bring his essence anymore. When he was pointed in the direction of Jehovah's Witnesses, like, because then he stopped doing the sexy stuff, didn't curse. Not that you need to curse to be cool at all, but it was very him, And so then I in a way felt the impact of like a first death with him. It was like, that's the man who is Prince. That's not the beingness of Prince. A very different thing.
Wow. Yeah, see, I didn't sort of follow him obviously as closely as you have, being such a huge fan of his, but yeah, that's quite an interesting way to look at it. That it gets me thinking now. So I'm sort of, oh, okay, I'll have to kind of digest that a bit. But yeah, that's in a way sad though, isn't it? If
it is. But also, I don't know what purpose his soul had in incarnating and having that life. I can look at it from the outside, and I'm not judging, but judge it as he was channeling his pure self here and not here. But I don't know what his soul came here to do. It's not my business.
True.
But I can use that journey and say, okay, I can track kind of where I feel like he stopped channeling that pure essence of himself. How can I make sure I don't do that? How can I make sure I stay on track? And so it's still a gift for me.
Yeah. Really good way of looking at it. Definitely. Absolutely. And, yeah. I suppose he still had that spark, but just got dimmed a lot by circumstances that we might not know or aware of, or whatever happened in his life.
Totally.
But it doesn't take away the fact that he was a genius in what he did. I mean, right. I so remember the time when, he came out like with Purple Rain and all that, and my mom and I, we both loved him. And we both always got asked why. And I really remember that people actually said to us, but he's so ugly and he's only tiny. And my mum and I looked at each other and went, hello, what's wrong with you? Who cares about his height? Or he's a sexy man. Can't you feel it? Can't you see it? And then seeing him live as well just cemented for us, anyone who doesn't understand that, your loss, not mine. So yeah, I was always a bit gobsmacked that people said that you don't have to love everyone, and different tastes and opinions are great. We need that in the world. But yeah, I don't know. I just could never quite understand why people, at least as a musician, not saw the genius in him,
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, my partner's a musician amongst many other things, and Prince isn't really his music. Like when he was growing up and learning to play guitar and writing music and stuff, Prince wouldn't have been one of his influences. But he told me that before we met, he'd gone to see Prince in concert, and I was like, "You did?" Like, I'm a bit surprised. And he said, "The man's a fucking genius." He said, like, "I'm not a huge fan of his music. That's not my style, but I know genius when I hear it." And he said, he can play every instrument. He writes and composes and play, and composing is a whole different thing to writing. He designs the stage sets, the clothes, like the choreography. Like he's what they call a polymath. He's a genius on many levels. And he said it comes through in his playing. And he said, although I don't, his music's not my style, it's not my flavor, I know genius, and I wanted to see that live. And I was like, okay, see the respect. There's respect there.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, always, I mean, obviously there was this, and like you said, we were sort of similar ages, I think, growing up, because I remember being a teenager and seeing him and him around, women and everything. It never felt, a lot of people said, oh, what is he doing with these women? It's not very respectful. But I never had that feeling. I always thought, I want to be around him as a woman. That was always my take on him.
To me, he empowered women, like all his, as far as I know, the lyrics that I know of his earlier music, like I said, I didn't really listen to the second half, was very empowering. It's about women having their sexual and bodily autonomy. He might talk about, you're beautiful and I would like to make sweet love to you, kind of thing in some way, but it was never some of the stuff that is out there today. It was empowering, is all I can say. I felt, as I was coming into my sexuality at the time, very empowered to be a sexual woman. I had so much sexual energy going on as I was growing up. And, I grew up in the South in America, and we were told that only, sluts, and being a slut was a bad thing, women had sexual energy and wanted to have sex, but men were supposed to sleep around. And so I was like, am I a man because I've got so much sexual energy? I don't want to keep my legs shut. I like having sex. Whereas Prince was like telling women, be a sexual being. And in fact, he had protege bands that were women being empowered to be their sexual self. And so I kind of felt like, whether he intended it or not, I got permission to be who I really was from his music, from him being who he was, and from him, speaking the way he did about women in his songs. I also think, if I'm really honest, I also think he didn't really maybe know or understand how to do relationships well. Like, I have read some stuff about him since that makes me think he was absolutely a genius in his specific zone of genius. And, not at everything else, as we all are when we are playing at being human.
I think that's a great takeaway as well. You can have your zone of genius, but you're not going to be a genius in everything. And that's totally okay. I think the awareness of it is key. So we can actually work in that sweet spot, but are aware that there might be some work that we need to do elsewhere. And I guess in that, he is a good example of that, really.
I don't know if you know the work of John DeMartini. He's also a polymath, funnily enough, and he talks a lot about human behavior and values. And his thing, which I can only give you a sliver of, but he talks about, there's no such thing as a saint who isn't also a sinner, and there's no such thing as a sinner who isn't also a saint. And if you become infatuated with someone, it's because that's the fantasy of them, and you're not seeing the whole person. And so, the idea is, in order for us to bring our fullest, truest self, we have to own and accept and love and incorporate all of our parts, dark, light, and shadow. And so for Prince, I did have him on a pedestal for a long time. I was infatuated with him for a long time. And then I balanced that out by looking, okay, he has this zone of genius, something incredible comes through that resonates with me. I like that music. It feels good to me. It wakes something up in me. There's something super juicy I get from it. And he's also a whole being that has areas where he's kind of shit, and where he's a bit dark, and where he's and so to not expect our heroes to be perfect, because they're not. And then we don't have to expect ourselves to be perfect, because we're not. So for me, he's a whole lesson, like his zone of genius wakes me up in ways nothing else has. And his humanity and flaws keeps me balanced. I'm not trying to be something that I'm projecting fantasy onto.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that the way you just described it. And I mean, to be fair, when you're a teenage girl, 13, 14, your hormones are just everywhere, aren't they? And it's just crazy how much you project onto someone, is that an artist or a boy in real life. It's just crazy what's going on in your head. So that fantasy bit's obviously blown out of proportion a lot. But yeah, eventually I think we all kind of realize that we can love our artists, but even they have crappy days, and they're not always the nicest. So
yeah, absolutely. I had a friend who was definitely infatuated with Adam Ant. And before I met her, she had followed him around the country. She'd been to loads of his tours, to the point where she actually met, I think, his mother or sister or somebody, and then eventually met him, and they kind of became friends, sort of. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there. And it would be 26 years ago now, she said to me, I'm going for a coffee in Camden. Come with me. And I was like, well, I've got my daughter, she's in a stroller. She's 2 years old. She's like, no, man, just come. We're just going to go for a coffee. And I was like, that's weird. She doesn't usually go into Camden. Anyway, we go to Camden. She's like, a friend of mine's going to meet us for a coffee. And I was like, who? And she's like, Adam. Or actually, that's not his name. I think his name's Stuart. She said, Stuart. And then Adam Ant shows up. And I'm like, fuck. But, he was also like, she was infatuated with him and could only see the fantasy she had of him, which was
Mhm.
that, that which he projected out for his music. But he also
Mm.
had a lot of struggles, mental health struggles, and all sorts of other things. She refused to see that.
Oh, what a
And of course
shame.
ended up getting very hurt. Whereas I
Mhm.
would much rather see the whole person, because that also inspires me.
Mhm.
Prince being actually human and channeling magic is much more inspiring to me than him just being magical, because I'm not that.
Yeah, and in a way, that's, I think your subconscious does go and sort of knocks on your conscious door, saying that's an illusion. Wake up. Don't stay there. It's not
Mm,
always that perfect, because perfect doesn't exist.
right.
You all have rough edges, and so yeah. No, that's kind of, in a way, that's kind of sad that it happened, but almost a little bit predictable, like you said, if she only saw that one piece of that person.
Mm.
Hmm. Well, yeah, Prince. Look, I think we could talk for a very long time about him, and anyone who, yeah, hopefully most people will understand our, I don't want to say fascination, but he is an incredible human being, good and bad combined. And he is a genius in what he did. And I think if we can use that, and like you said, imply that in our own life and say we are a genius somewhere, even though we also have our darkness and our edges, it's totally okay. That,
Mm.
I think his legacy, apart from the music, if people can see that, amazing, great. His job's
Oh,
done.
I think he has inspired and continues to inspire so many people. Musicians for sure.
Mhm.
Musicians talk about him all the time. I saw Janelle Monáe talking about how, he helped her, mentored her with the music. And in fact, she said, this was at a recent Red Table Talk she did. She said that he was willing to put his mystery aside to be a good mentor. It was like, because he courted his mystery, like he kept himself mysterious. You can watch interviews with like Jimmy Fallon and Dave Grohl and all these people that met him, where he was being very weird and mysterious, and he was kind of courting that on purpose. Whereas he also could move that out of the way
Mhm.
and help fellow musicians. So he's inspired so many people, so many people in his realm, I guess, of music and entertainment,
Mhm.
and outside of that. And like you say, his legacy will continue. I'm sure at some point he'll move down the ladder as years and years and years go by. But what he did in the 80s certainly, I think, will always be talked about.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Oh, I suppose this is probably a difficult question for you in a way, because there's so many amazing Prince songs. But if you would have to pick one song that describes your life and or your business, which one would you pick? And give us a little bit of why as well.
Well, there's so many. I think, though, off the top of my head, I might answer this differently on a different day, but off the top of my head, I mean, there's a song called Sexuality, Let Your Body Be Free, that kind of thing. And yeah, that's, this might sound really arrogant. I mean it in the appropriate way. That's my zone of genius. Men's sexuality it just comes through, like something just happens. There's something that happens. And when I am not in my own way, and when I am in that zone of genius, that song is it, you
Mhm.
know, yeah, sexuality. I mean, there's loads of them, but that's the one that
That's
comes to mind.
nice. I like it. So anyone who hasn't heard it, go and check it out. And yeah, hopefully you'll agree that it's a good song, and you never know, they might get
Great. It's on
something
a
out of it.
very early album. I can't remember which one. It's
Oh,
on one before Purple Rain.
oh, that's very early on then. I probably wouldn't even know that album, because I admit I'm one of those Prince appreciative people who doesn't know all the albums, but the songs that I do know I love. So
And either. And his first three albums, there was one called Prince, there was one called For You, and I can't remember the other one, of Controversy maybe. To me, they all kind of go together. I think they were released within 2 years. So to me, they are all kind of one album.
right.
I can't off the top of my head think, oh, that song was on that one and this one was on that one. And, I think Controversy had, I can remember those songs a bit more because that was probably, and 1999. He had 4 albums before Purple Rain. Yeah, they all kind of go together. So I don't remember which one Sexuality was on, but I know it was from before Purple Rain.
There you go. We can probably look it up after.
Are we going to now? I'm curious. Yeah.
I bet you are. No, I love that chat. I love talking about Prince. We probably could dive into more of why he can be such a great inspiration and someone to I don't like the word look up to, but sort of reference to, I guess, for our own life and how to use music and appreciate artists and how they can help us with our own lives and businesses and zones of geniuses. But yeah, I think we've got to keep it to a certain time limit. Is there anything else that you feel you want to share about Prince and his music that you feel could maybe be a golden nugget for someone else?
I think what comes is where we kind of started, which was around context. Like any music that we listen to now that was either from before we were born or from when we were really young, we might not understand the context in which that came up. So, for example, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. So, I was around a lot of music. Elvis Presley's from there. And the context that, say, when Elvis came out was that he was stealing Black people music. They wouldn't play Black people on the radio. So he made it happen. And because he moved his hips in a certain way, he was banned. Now we listen to it and his stuff sounds pretty tame, right? And so with Prince, context is everything. And so if you're going to listen to Prince, I would say listen to everything that's maybe, God, the album name fell out of my head again. The one that came after Purple Rain and back, but remember the context of the years in which they came out. That's, it's like if you go to an art gallery and you look at something and say, well, I could have made that. And it's like, yes, but the context in which this was made is very different from the life you were living. If you had been living that life, that would be revolutionary, And so when you listen to music, whether it's Prince or whether it's someone else that you prefer, think about the context in which it was made, because that will potentially give the music more meaning or deeper understanding.
Oh God, that is a really, really, really good point. Absolutely. Because I agree with regards to Prince. I do remember there was a lot of controversy when a lot of his hits came out, and so context definitely is a big one when you listen to Prince and other artists, like you said.
If I can throw one other thing in, it would be to close your eyes, listen, and see what happens in your body. Some songs are just going to pass through, and some songs may awaken something, and just see what happens.
Yeah, that's a juicy question. I like that one, because you never know with Prince. Oh, you can go down so many different roads.
Exactly. And you don't even have to know the words. It's not necessarily the words that are going to do it. It's the feeling of the music.
Yeah, and his voice as well, because sometimes, Anyway, we're not going to go into a rabbit hole on that one.
I can talk to you forever, so I will.
Yes, me too. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing your love of Prince, and apart from Prince, that one person can really, or one musician can really have such a huge impact in our lives and help us sometimes find our zone of genius. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from today. Just let it happen and don't give a damn what other people say about it. Just do it.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on. Yeah, you're
Thank
so
you.
welcome. And I will put all your details in the episode descriptions if anyone's intrigued about your work or wants to connect with you. They will have all the details there to get in touch. And yeah, maybe even other Prince fans, who knows? You never know.
Always welcome.
Exactly, that's right. Yes, that's it. So thanks so much, B-Siders, for tuning in for another great episode. And until the next one, as I always say, keep on dancing, keep on rocking, and look after yourself. Yeah, that's it. Until then, bye.